Hi, welcome to Inside Insider. I'm really excited that I'm bringing to you the second part of my conversation with Don Roberto. Now, in the first part of the conversation with Don Roberto, he talked about shamanism. I'm sure you have already watched it, but if you haven't, please find the link below and it will take you there. Remember to click on the subscribe button and the alert button so that you know when fresh content is coming out. In my second part of the conversation with Don Roberto, he gets personal. He talks about how the spirit called him into the path of shamanism. He will also be sharing his experience with ayahuasca and how it is deeply humbling and deeply healing. So without much further delay, let's get to it.
Kano abano, rama kano abano, hakon shaman akinra, senem para mayon shaman kin, medicina maketai
So I want to
tonina.
talk a little about how you get started as a
Mm.
shaman.
It's a good question. I personally never sought this path. Traditionally, the path calls you. Okay. Traditionally, the ancestors or the spirits will select somebody within the tribe or the community and say, "You are going to be working on behalf of the spirits and the community." And if the person denies this and says, "I don't want this," then something called the spiritual or shamanic sickness can be descend upon them until they agree to do what the ancestors or the ancestral spirits want. It's called a calling to receive the messages that you should be working in this way. And then the other thing is called a shamanic illness, which no doctor can actually identify the root cause of it, and they cannot cure it. It's maybe sometimes they're bedridden or they're passing blood, and nobody can actually locate the physical cause of this. And so
Wow.
when I was in Kilimanjaro, when I was doing some work as an anthropologist in Africa, I spoke to a medicine man and I said, "How did you get started with this?" And he said, the ancestors came and they said, "Do you want to do this?" And he said, "No." And they said, "Well, we'll be back next year." And they made him bedridden for a year. And then at the end of the year, they came back and then they said, "Do you want to do this?" And he said, "No." And then again, for a whole year, he was bedridden. And the third year, the beginning of the third year, they said, "You want to do this again?" And kind of shook his head and said, "Okay, all right, I'll do this." So that's a classic story, and it really does happen. I didn't have to go through these trials and tribulations. I was interested, and basically I left it for 20 years. I mean, I even encountered the word or the concept of ayahuasca in the beginning, 20 years in 1987, and then 20 years later, I'm in Taiwan, and it comes back to me. People start to message me and saying, can we be your friends? And I look at their interests, and it says, shamanism and ayahuasca, and I haven't really given it any thought in all this time. Basically, I messaged this guy. I said, "What are you interested in ayahuasca for, or shamanism?" He said, "Well, we have the same plants that do the same thing in Taiwan." And then the same week, another guy invited me for lunch. And then he was a very straight-laced guy. And so at the end of the conversation, he says, "Let me give you a gift." And he reached down and he pulled out of his briefcase a jar of brown liquid. This is ayahuasca. Then I realized that spirit somehow was, communicating with me in that Celestine prophecy. The signals and the signs are all around. And I went, I'm in Taiwan, as far away as you can get from the Amazon. And here are two people in the same week bringing this onto my radar. Hello. So what happened is that the first guy contacted me and said, "Hey, Chinese New Year, we're going to do a ceremony. Do you want to join?" And I was like, I'd be stupid not to join. It was down in the south, and they had a house, and it was a daytime thing, and they warmed up the medicine and mumbled a few prayers. So I drank that, and it tasted bitter and nasty, and it sat really badly in my tummy for half an hour, and I went, whoop, and then I rushed out and I purged in the flower bed, and I was shaking my head, and I looked around and I saw this guy standing there, and his head was on fire. And what they had done is that in the garden, they had actually prepared some tents for some privacy if you want to lie down. So actually at that point, the energy that was flowing through my body was so intense that I had no option but to want to lie down. I just couldn't even stand. I was like, this is really seriously powerful. I've never experienced anything like this. So I went into a tent, I took my glasses off, I closed my eyes, and the most powerful visions ever that I'd had came rushing in, and it was 360 degrees. And they were very, very intense. And about 10 minutes later, they disappeared, and I was left in silence and darkness. But within the silence and darkness, I felt this presence, this intelligence, this huge, huge wisdom and presence. And I felt like I was being scanned, that something was inside me, and I was being examined. So first of all, I went to myself, wow, the epiphany was, I haven't drunk a chemical, I haven't drunk a drug, I haven't just drunk a liquid. I've taken in a living spirit inside my body. And this is the thing that was looking at me. And that was a big shock, because I went, this is a whole different dimension of experience that I've never had. And then it said to me, telepathically, it said, let me show you what happens when you die. Suddenly, I was in a space where there was no physical form. My consciousness had been liberated from this tiny vehicle that you call a body, and it was actually, without this restriction of physicality, this consciousness was enormous. It was immense. It was just incredibly huge. And I said to myself, "Oh my God!" But this feels familiar. Somehow deep within my memories, that there was some kind of recognition, a really direct recognition of this state of consciousness. And as such, then I said to myself, well, if this is the case, then I've lived and died before in order to have a memory of this, right? So I was so powerfully moved by that experience that I came out of that initial ayahuasca experience with a sense of like, I found what I've been looking for. All my life, I've been searching and reading and studying and traveling and asking and in the pursuit of something that was transcendental, in the knowledge that there was definitely something that lay beyond the three-dimensional. And here I was, face to face with something so numinous, so powerful, so close to the word divine, or closer at least than anything else I'd experienced in my life, that I was absolutely certain that I was at the right place at the right time and being connected to this powerful, powerful source of knowledge. And that's where my journey with ayahuasca began.
So in so many ways, the spirit actually called you and drawn you in. Did your life change?
Oh, absolutely. My life has completely changed since then. I mean, I was a humble English teacher teaching all levels from kindergarten right through to fourth-year university, National University in Taiwan. And so I was doing that in order to earn my money, but also my passion was photography. Okay, so that's what I was involved with. But actually, it wasn't necessarily an instantaneous decision to drop everything. In the beginning, I regarded the ayahuasca as a sacrament, as a vehicle to connect to the transcendent. But as I worked with it, I realized it was not just a sacrament, but it was a medicine, a very powerful medicine of the spirit. This is very profound work. If you're working with someone's spirit or someone's soul, you really need to know what you're doing. There was a lady in a neighboring city who had basically sat with another shaman 55 times, a Peruvian woman. And I said to her, look, there's this thing called the Icaros that are the sacred songs that can control the space and the ceremony and guide the person in their experience. Will you teach me? And she said, I'd love to, but there's actually somebody in Japan right now who is even better than me. And so I wrote to this person, please come and teach me. And so they did, and they began to teach me. And the difference was so enormous once the element of the Ikaro was introduced, the sacred song. It was almost like, suddenly the whole ceremony took off on a different level. He said, if you think I'm good, you should meet my teacher. I said, well, who is she? Oh, she's this lady, and she'll be in Costa Rica. She was a small woman, very humble, no airs and graces, no big shamanic fanfare, all this. But basically, we were in a circular building called a maloca, and that could fit 30 people, all lying next to each other, almost like a dandelion in that kind of circular pattern. And I went in with some pride and some arrogance, and it happened that they do the ceremony at night. And so we drank the medicine, and then she began to whistle. And then as she whistled, in her voice was all the sounds of the jungle. I was like, how do you do that? I mean, all the sounds. It's incredible. And then she segued into humming. And so from the whistling to the humming, and suddenly the air is full of hummingbirds. I mean, I could see hundreds of hummingbirds. I was like, oh, we're in a completely different territory now. And then she began to sing gently. There's just this melody emerging within the darkness. And at that point in time, I felt such repulsion, such hatred to this woman. I didn't even want to be in the same room. And I found myself crawling out of the maloca towards the door on my hands and knees with tears streaming down my cheeks, saying to myself, or saying to the medicine as well, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize I was this sick, right? And then I got outside and I sat there, and I basically sat there rocking, because what happened was that the medicine, now we're talking about a whole different level of expertise and knowledge base and skill set that I was being shown. You know, I had my own little thing that I had done, but I really was now connecting with the real source and real tradition. And so what had happened with that medicine is that the medicine said, in this case said, okay, let's roll up our sleeves and do some real work. Let's look at the stuff that really ails you, really that you've carried all your life, but you didn't even know you carried. So that was childhood trauma that obviously I'd gone through, because it suddenly came up in my body. I was shaking and fearful, and it was bubbling up. So I was going through, not necessarily remembering the experience, but the whole imprint of it was coming out. And so it was really harsh. It was really intense. And actually, I was apprehensive about continuing, because I'd signed up for 9 ceremonies, right, over 3 weeks. 3 years, 3. And luckily there was a day in between ceremonies, so there was time to recuperate and regenerate and process. And so I decided to stay for the next ceremonies. And to be honest with you, it was a wise decision, but it was also, the ceremonies got harder and harder, because it was like digging deeper and deeper and deeper. And there were many points I found myself during ceremony saying, I'm never ever doing this again. And then recovering and doing the next ceremony, because it's not a joyride. It's not recreational. This is real powerful healing and transformative work. And you need the spirit of a warrior in order to do this. So I found myself in a predicament where I had to learn, because if I was going to do this, continue working with people, I really needed to go to the next level and really immerse myself in the tradition. So basically, the following year, I found a place that would teach me according to the tradition of the Shipibo people, which are a tribe in Peru. And so I began to root myself in the Shipibo tradition and the Shipibo way of holding the medicine and singing the songs. And within the Amazonian tradition, when you work with ayahuasca, it's not just ayahuasca you have to have a relationship with. You have also other plants, perhaps rose or oak or eucalyptus, that have their own medicinal quality. And so we train with those plants. And what a training in that tradition means is basically dieting. And that's not to lose weight, but it's to observe a regimen of not taking any salt or sugar or spices or oil. Sexual activity is banned for a period of time that you are dieting. And we're creating a context or the fertile ground for the plant itself to land in your body energetically and to weave itself within your body and give you its gifts of knowledge and healing capacity.
And also about the lineage of the shamans. Can you give a bit more insight into that?
So, for example, in Peru, there are 2 distinct lineages. There's the lineage that is Spanish influenced, and they sing in Spanish, or they may mix it with Quechua, but they're not necessarily tribal people. They don't come from a specific tribe. So what's happened is that the tradition that's emerged has been syncretic. It's been a blend of elements, and often working with different kind of iconography, like there may be some Christian references there in that work. Whereas the Shipibo are a tribe, and there are various ones, the Kashkinawa or the Shipibo or the Bora. They have their own lineages that are specific to their tribes. And so what's really useful is to be rooted in a lineage so that you have a foundation, you have a tradition that you work with. Because, so for example, the Shipibo, the way they work is a very specific, it's like engineering. Their language means when they start singing to you, they're saying, well, first of all, we're going to do this, 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 and then we're going to look at this problem, and then we're going to do this, 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 and it's very specific. And so to have the ability to work in that way also confers great precision in one's work, because we open up to working one-to-one and saying, first we're going to identify this level, then we're going to balance things out, then we're going to take this out, and then we're going to strengthen you and protect you. Whereas within the mestizo tradition, it tends to be more generic, more general, a bit more like name checking. Hey, let's call on the jaguar or the hummingbird or the protection of the spirits, but not necessarily as specifics. And the more I work within the Shipibo tradition, the more it reveals to me the how powerful and how rich it is. There's so much to learn. You know, every time I go there, I learn something new, because I'm also working with different plants, so they show me different aspects of their power.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you.
Medicina maketai tonilam. Sitting para mayon shaman kin. Hey.